context. We've helped sponsor theological conferences and talks on spirituality, including a very memorable one from the Zoroastrian tradition, a tradition we don't hear too much about, unfortunately. We've arranged essay competitions encouraging young voices, studying dialogue between traditions. We've arranged book launches, such as the one for the celebrated writer Karen Armstrong with her recent book, Sacred Nature. Then we sent, not too long ago, some delegates to a worldwide conference in Singapore, exploring their relationships between religious identities and cohesive societies. So, a range of different activities. We also publish a celebrated journal, Interreligious Insight, twice a year, exploring the philosophy and theology of interreligious engagement, again, from different perspectives. So for today's program, for this particular week, we have different presentations to offer you. I'm going to just give you the list of what they are. The first is from the Reverend Marcus Braybrook, one of the World Congress's admired presidents and really long-time inspirer of interfaith work since the 1960s. And he'll sketch some of the factors which led to the founding of the World Congress in 1936. Then there'll be a series of short clips from 5 members of the Congress, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Jain, and Sikh voices, all pre-recorded, but each giving a flavor of why they're involved in interreligious work. Then these will be followed by a conversational piece between 2 people, a Baha'i and a Buddhist, both of whom attended the COP26 Climate Emergency Conference in Glasgow, in Scotland, in 2021. Now, all of these presentations are designed to flow from one to another. But you know how life is. There might be a bit of a digital switchover you'll have to experience and cope with. Finally, at the end of all of that, there'll be time for some comments and questions and discussion. There's quite a number of people in view, or at least we hope they're going to come into view. So if we want to ask questions, it's best to use the chat function, and I hope you're all familiar with that. And that means we can pick up as many voices as the timetable allows us. So, reaching back to the beginning of the World Congress.
The most important person in history. One of them mentioned Wellington, I think another mentioned Nelson, and a third person said Sri Ramakrishna. Well, I'm not sure that all your officers have heard about him, but I am sure you have. Anyhow, the person who said that was Francis Younghusband, who came to be, in 1936, the founder of the World Congress of Faiths. But he had a great knowledge of mystics, and this is one of his early books, Modern Mystics. And eventually, in 1936, he founded the World Congress of Faiths. Now, what I've been discovering in a little book I've just been writing, Interfaith Pioneers, is that there was a very close link back to the 1893 Parliament. Certainly Francis Younghusband knew about it. And in 1924, there was in London a Religions of Empire conference. And at that, there was a lot of talk and reference back to the 1893 Parliament. And then in 1933, there was a second Parliament, again often forgotten, in Chicago. Francis Younghusband went to that. He was a key speaker at it. And he was asked to hold a third Congress, a third Parliament in London. They chose the date 1936. Well, the title got changed to the World Congress of Faiths, and that then was followed that within a week of that ending. Younghusband got a committee together to create an ongoing body. And then they had a conference the next year in Oxford, the second year in Cambridge, and then in Paris. And they were about to sort of meet in The Hague when the Second World War broke out. Young husband and sister who were continuing during the war with conferences, and there were interfaith declarations about the future that was hoped for, and religious support for the plans for the United Nations. He died just before the end of the Second War, and really for a long period after that, everybody was concentrating on trying to rebuild, faith communities were trying to rebuild, and the general Christian attitude to other faiths was, rather, I was going to say rather negative, or perhaps more accurately, very missionary. And so, but the World Congress of Faith survived. It was really quite a small body. And I joined in the 1960s, soon after a year studying in India. And then for a couple of years later, I was at the University Library in Cambridge looking for a book for my research. And there on the same shelf, there was the 2-volume book, History of the 1893 Parliament of World Religions. But not many people knew about it then. And as time went on, other interfaith bodies emerged, the Temple of Understanding, Religions for Peace, and so on. And so in the 1980s, we got together, leaders of several of these organizations, and it was quite clear we didn't want one multi-organization. It was a movement, just like the movement campaign for that landmine. And so we decided, though, to mark together the centenary of the 1893 Parliament. And partly in preparation for this, I wrote this book, A Pilgrimage of Hope, which is a sort of example of what was going on. And so we had an inaugural meeting in London, we had a great gathering in Bangalore, one in Delhi in Japan, and then, of course, the great Parliament again in 1993 in Chicago, and so subsequent parliaments and so on. And so over the years, interfaith work has increased, and I think for a World Congress of Faith, where the focus is often on Britain, we have got these partnerships, of course, with other emerging bodies, United Religions Initiative, and as you go on, and you could do. But this is why I think this week is so important that we do feel we really are part of a worldwide movement. Because sometimes you organize a local meeting and there's not all that much support. And there's so much that it's urgent for us to do together. And so I wish you well in the support in all your activities. And just one more thing I was going to mention about the World Congress of Faith. Obviously, there's a website, but there's also a very good journal, Interfaith Initiative, edited by Alan Race. And I'm sure we all need to share much more information. But above all, my blessings and good wishes for all your work for peace and for a better and happier world.
Just bear with me.
Our rabbis of old taught us when somebody stamps however many coins with one seal, all of them look.
More thing I was going to mention about information, but above all, my blessings and good wishes for all your work for peace and for a better and happier world.
Our rabbis of old taught us that when somebody stamps however many coins with one seal, all of them look like each other. But when the Holy One, the King of Kings, stamps everyone with the image of Adam Rishon, the first human, not one of us looks like our companion. In our Jewish history, there are many examples of the importance of valuing human diversity. On holiday recently, we stayed in the charming Dutch town of Gouda. Quite by chance, we discovered we were staying in the same street as the former synagogue, now a church. In the street were a number of Stolpersteine, brass plaques, marking places where Jews had once lived and from where they were deported and murdered by the Nazis. A few streets away, we found the former Jewish old age home, which had nearly 70 names recorded outside. And in nearby Utrecht, we found a former Jewish orphanage, a building still in use for young people's training and education, but now without Jews. The Nazis drew their hatred of Jews from racial stereotyping, failure to recognize the value of difference. At this time of interfaith awareness, the lesson is obvious. Dialogue is not an option, but a real necessity if we are to overcome prejudice and value our differences. Our scripture teaches us in the book of Proverbs, Kamayim hapanim lepanim, kein lev ha'adam la'adam. As a face reflects a face in water, so a person's heart reflects another's heart. With all our differences, we are all made in the image of God. In these days, when there is sadly once again war in Europe, the message is more vital than ever.
While Christianity is only about 2,000 years old, and its followers do not always agree about the meaning of its essential texts, most agree that it was established when God, after millennia of trying to teach through the words of prophets, decided to become human, to incarnate and dwell among us, to teach us in person how to be happy according to God's plan. The primary message is that we are to love God with our whole being and our neighbors as ourselves. I believe an inclusive definition of neighbors is the heart of that message. The incarnate God, Yeshua, or Jesus of Nazareth, spent approximately 3 years in public settings teaching and healing the ill and the troubled. He ate with the wealthy and well-educated of his tradition, Judaism, as well as despicable tax collectors and ordinary fishermen. He seemed to treasure the time he spent with courageous women as well as men. He interacted with Samaritans and Syrophoenicians and with Roman soldiers who had occupied his homeland of Judea. He helped to heal and pay attention to those deemed unclean because of disease. He cared about those people in those interactions, treating those of all genders, nations, and faith traditions with equal respect and care. He also connected all of creation in his preaching about lilies of the field, birds of the air, sheep, and fig trees. Everyone seems to be part of this. Everything seems to belong under the loving gaze of our parent God of compassion. Every human being is a child of God, and that means everyone is my sibling, whether we speak the same language or worship in the same way. In the decades that I have studied the spiritual messages of the world's religions, the common thread I found is this sense of interconnectedness. Everyone and everything created belongs. If I am to live as Jesus the Christ taught, I am compelled to embrace interfaith work with these siblings in openness and gratitude, with joy and love.
In the name of God, the infinitely good, the most merciful. The world and all that it contains symbolizes God's love for diversity. It goes without saying that had God as creator not loved diversity, there would be but a monochrome world. The diverse richness of cultures and faiths is to be celebrated and embraced as a natural consequence of the divine gift of human.
Monowar, I think it's gone silent again. Would you unmute the video?
Differed about.
That's better.
The diversity of faith is part of the divinely ordained plan. Islamic tradition informs us that God sent some 124,000 messengers and prophets to all the peoples of the earth with the same message to worship the one absolute infinite being. These messages came to remind humanity of their real home, God, and to enable human fulfillment and flourishing here and now. In relation to human diversity, the Quran states, "O people, behold, we have created you all out of a male and a female, and have made you into nations and tribes so that you might come to know one another. Verily, the noblest of you in the sight of God is the one who is most deeply conscious of him. Behold, God is all-knowing, all-aware. There is no superiority of any race over another. All are equal. Islam sees human diversity of race, faith, creed, and color as a basis for building mutual relationships of love, understanding, and cooperation for the common good. It is through the process of dialogue and conversation that we deepen our understanding of other faiths and cultures, thereby creating a better and peaceful world."
We Jains believe in diversity of values. Our principle of Anekantavad, multiplicity of viewpoints, teaches us that there are different opinions, different religions, and different type of people following their own ideologies. When you go to any garden, a beautiful park, you will see different color of flowers. Some small, some big, some red, some yellow, some white. But that makes garden beautiful. This is how our earth is. We live here with different ideologies, but that's what makes us great. So let us live in perfect harmony. Let us accept each other's differing values. Let everyone practice the philosophy, the spirituality, or the religion in their own way. We'll be happier, we'll be more content if we accept these things. These are the fundamental things for our survival and for our well-being.
Since the inception of the Sikh faith in the 15th century, with the advent of Guru Nanak, diversity has been celebrated and valued. Guru Nanak had with him Mardana, a Muslim, as a companion on his journeys in India, Nepal, Tibet, Sri Lanka, and Middle East. And some say Bala, a Hindu, was in him too. It is also said that he also met the Pope in Rome. Guru Nanak fostered the tradition of dialogue with those of other faiths by traveling to their centers and holding dialogue with them, many times in very difficult and life-threatening circumstances. Even now, Guru Nanak is called Baba Nanak Shah Fakir by Muslims, Nanak Lama by Nepalese and Tibetan Buddhists, and Indian holy man by the 16th century Vatican, and Guru Nanak by Indians. His message to the Hindus was to be good Hindus and Muslims to be good Muslims. There is neither Hindu nor Muslim. And for other faiths, a similar message was given. He told the Pope to abolish slavery, thereby implying that we are all first and foremost human. I feel that it's the duty of a Sikh not only to value diversity, but to work towards fostering good relations with all people, Sikh and non-Sikh, because we are all the children of the same divine parent. Sarbat da Phala, for the good of all, humans and everything in nature that exists, are the words with which every congregational prayer ends, and we could say is the Sikh mission. Furthermore, there is the acceptance of other religions as different parts to the divine, and our sacred most Sikh scripture, Guru Granth Sahib, along with the composition of the Sikh Gurus, contains the writings of Hindu and Muslim saints of different denominations and social standing. There are also many references in the Guru's writings of different schools of Hindu thought, Buddhist, Jains, Abrahamic faiths, and Zoroastrians, and the values they inculcate and the rituals they observe. Ved Kateb Kaho Ma Chute Chuta Jona Chitare. Do not say that the scriptures of other faiths, such as the Vedas, the Bible, the Torah, and the Quran, are false. False is the one who does not reflect on them. These are the traditions and values of my neighbors here in the UK today. What a blessing to enjoy such neighborliness.
No, we haven't got that.
It makes me wonder whether the appeal to that kind of spirituality, which I endorse, by the way, whether it's going to be enough to change hearts and minds, in the sense that you're right to say we've drunk from the scientific well deeply, and maybe, well, certainly to the exclusion of other kinds of perspective on the world. But I just think you look at all of those major civilizations now, India, China, and so on, as well as the West, we're all actually kind of hell-bent on destruction
Yes,
and exploitation, and so on. And so it's not, in that sense, it's not a kind of Western problem that we've foisted on everyone. I don't think it's something to do with losing this. I mean, I think that's what you're saying, isn't it?
Yeah.
Losing this sense of sacredness at the heart of all things. And what we need, it seems to me, is some kind of dialogue, if you like, between that kind of spirituality, presence of the sacred in all things, contemplating it, as what you came to towards the end of your talk, and then some sort of prophetic heat at the same time to say that as a contemplation in one sense is not quite enough. There's the change of the human heart that's required. And sometimes that might require maybe gluing yourself to the road.
maybe, but I don't think making people angry is going to help. So it's a way of trying to change the way we think, the way we view the world, and to view it with reverence. There isn't much reverence in our world, and we've got to try. That's the point.
But anyway, I suppose getting to maybe just because I'm here and in an interfaith kind of context, I'm wondering, I know, Lucy, that you are a Buddhist, and I'm just wondering how that felt to you. What does your faith tradition sort of, what role does that play in all of this for you? So your work is a little bit different, but your studies is now moving into this field. What about your faith tradition?
Yeah, so I've been practicing Nichiren Buddhism for around 11 years. And I'm a member of the Soka Gakkai International, which is a lay Buddhist organization. And I think the biggest role that my faith and my practice has in anything, but in any work that I do, but particularly with something like the climate crisis, which is massive and can be very tough and difficult to even read about and think about, but to be involved, it can be really difficult. So the biggest thing is that my faith gives me is hope. And with my practice, I'm able to create hope in an otherwise bleak situation. And it's because there are many Buddhist teachings which give me hope and prevent me from falling into a state of despair. Just for example, so the Buddhist law is a Buddhist law of cause and effect, and it's a very significant teaching for offering hope for the climate crisis, I feel. And as we well know, and as you said earlier, the climate crisis is a human-made crisis. It's a result of our own greed and foolishness, which has led us down this path of environmental destruction. And Nichiren Daishonin, who is the monk or the priest whose Buddhism that I practice, in his writings, he often quotes a sutra that reads, and I'd just like to read this very short quote. It says, if you want to understand the causes that existed in the past, look at the results as they are manifested in the present. And if you want to understand what results will be manifested in the future, look at the causes that exist in the present. And for me, this reminds me that the future exists in the present moment, and it's determined by what I do right now, in this moment and in the next. So the future is not fixed, and I can make a difference. And this teaching really encourages me to keep striving, to keep making positive causes in terms of the climate crisis. And it gives me hope that, you know, by becoming wiser, more compassionate, and making better choices, we can collectively start creating a better future. I don't think this kind of teaching, for me, exists in many other places. If you read the news, you have conversations, it's such a bleak outlook, and many people are falling into despair because we lack these messages of hope and these real kind of teachings. So I feel really, fortunate that I have met a practice and a teaching that enables me to create hope. When I can't find any, I'm able to create it for myself, and that really keeps me going. So yeah, that's a big one for me. And how about you? What role does your faith in the Baha'i tradition have in the work that you do?
I guess there's so many different ways that it does, but one of the teachings that, or one of the things that has been said that has always deeply impacted on me is it's just a very short couple of sentences, but says we cannot segregate the human heart from the environment outside us, and say that once one of these is reformed, everything will be improved. Humanity is organic with the world. Our inner lives mold the environment and is itself also deeply affected by it. The one acts upon the other, and every abiding change in the life of mankind is the result of these mutual reactions. And so it's that, for me, it's that sense of inner transformation has to take place, but then societal transformations, and those two things impact on us greatly, and we create the world that we live in, and then the world that we live in impacts on our human heart and the way that we are in the world. And so that's always been very powerful for me. And there's also another thing where Baha'u'llah says that nature is the expression of God's will in the contingent world. So that the sense that there's something absolutely sacred about the world of nature, and the natural world and the world that we inhabit is also profoundly impactful. But on a very practical level, the Baha'is very much believe that science and religion are both incredibly important paths to truth. And so that all the scientific evidence out there, there's absolutely no denying in any way, shape, or form that the science is telling us what the problem is. And, so Baha'is are very committed to listening to scientific truth. And, so we can't sort of sidestep this issue and ignore it in any way, shape, or form. It's real, it is happening, it's impacting on us. The evidence is out there in the world. So we have that scientific truth, but also the religious and spiritual truth that you know, it is a spiritual crisis. And that kind of combination of trying for me in a very limited way to understand the science of what's happening and what I need to do my, you know, my little bit to use less, consume less, you know, just travel less, all the things that I personally have to do. But also then what does my community do, and how can my community? So, I mean, one of the things that the Baha'i Task Force report did was wrote an eco-pledge that now all the Baha'i communities across Scotland, and now it's kind of filtering out to the wider world, are trying to commit to these different pledges within this eco-pledge. It's 19 pledges that Baha'is are going to be implementing in their lives around, you know, what we eat, how we travel, what companies we use, how we disinvest, just everything in there. So I'm really happy with the practical kind of implications. But like you, Lucy, I find that having a faith does give me hope. Having a spiritual practice gives me hope and helps me kind of reflect on what I can do, you know, and where I could be taking action. And it's sometimes, if it's a little bit overwhelming, it's very easy to get into the space of apathy and just think, oh, what can little old me do? Do you know what I mean? It's a big old world and a big old crisis. And actually, faith traditions don't allow you that get out clause. You know, the minute you pray and you meditate, you think, actually, you know, I cannot be apathetic, because this is about justice. This is about our world. This is about the way that we live. Yeah, but you can only work within your sphere of influence. So it's kind of also thinking, well, with what lens am I going to do my bit? You know, where am I going to put my energy? And it is, for me, it's in interfaith engagement and continuing to encourage that engagement with the climate crisis through our dialogues and through our interfaith action. And, you know, we founded a World Interfaith Harmony Grove of Trees. So some of that action can be practical, like planting trees, and, you know, other things like writing multi-faith declarations might not feel quite so practical, but it is, because it's coming from the human heart and saying this is really important. So still in that space where, what next?
In which case I'm going to intervene.
Yeah.
And say that might be a good moment to, you know, open up the floor. As well, you know, it's wonderful to hear the personal stories of what it's like to be in a place which is so fully in the news for that period of time, and you know, what things felt like, and then also what difference the faith commitment might make. I'm going to start off with a bit of for you both.
Yes.
It's not a technical one.
We ought to bring this to a close now, right?
I'm just wondering whether...
So do you want me to stop sharing?
Yeah. Yes. Okay. It's quite tricky, everyone. We'll hope for your patience on all of these things, to arrange clips and get the timings right and so on. Never mind. But let me just say, I think we're all grateful for those voices, for their wisdom, especially maybe that last clip focusing on, you know, the most important big picture, practical issue facing the whole planet, the climate emergency. I liked Maureen's phrase there, there's no get out clause. But practice also involves vision, spiritual vision, and spiritual vision involves questions of how religions think about one another, approach one another from their different perspectives. And as we all know, religions have not always been accommodating of one another in this way. So let's see if there's any comments, questions, a bit of audience response, if you will, for 10 minutes or so, and then I'll draw things to a close. So I hope people have managed to find chat and put something in there.
There isn't anything in the chat at the moment, so
Right,
it's maybe easier if you just ask everybody to ask their question on screen, as there are fairly few of us.
Okay, well, that's fine. We can, let's have a look. We can do that. Well, it says here there's something in a chat. Okay, so anybody who wants to make a comment, offer a perspective, challenge a thought, please, I guess you raise your hand, don't you? Or you can raise your hand on the screen, little icons at the bottom of the screen.
Alan Rayner says, what about the children?
He does, but is he saying that in chat?
Yes.
What about the children? Are there educationalists among the audience who might respond perhaps a little bit to that? It's a very key question. Children are, well, education is certainly in the news in the new UK quite a lot at present time, questions of funding and so on, but also questions of, what do we teach these days?
Well, can I just say that in schools, I think we have more opportunities for young people to visit places of worship, to actually meet other young people from different faith traditions. And there is much more going on from primary school onwards in terms of the climate change and the environment. So that's a really good investment for the future.
Any other comments anywhere?
Steve is waving.
Yeah, and I really appreciate what you're saying, Imam. And I have a question that really came out of a program the other day. When we try to involve young people, we also realize that these young people are going through their transition into adulthood. And that transition includes their schooling, their maturity, physically, and everything else. Finding someone to be with emotionally, a marriage, whatever, starting a family, and their involvement with interfaith seems to be much less. What we see is that once you've reached middle age, and I'll use that as 45, 50, you now have some more free time. Perhaps the work that you've done is over and you're even thinking about retirement. By the way, I don't believe in retirement. I tried to retire 3 times and it didn't happen. So when you have the free time, you spend more effort in recognizing the beauty of each other, no matter what your faith. I was heavily involved with interpersonal growth than I was with interfaith growth until I reached about 50. And as much as I was involved with so many different faith groups, I never put it all together until I had the time to spend. And I'd love to hear what other people have to say about that.
We've got Melanie with the hand up, another American perspective.
My background was from working in a university, and I really, without advertising it, really want to applaud the work of Eboo Patel and what is now called Interfaith America. When I was a university chaplain, it was called the Interfaith Youth Corps. And I brought students there every year for their national conference and training for interfaith. And what we found was this generation is more spiritual, but not religious. They have noted the fighting that goes on among denominations and even across the religious lines, and they're opting out. But the interfaith movement really had a lot of energy behind it because it was a way for them to tell stories about what they did believe in, rather than dealing with structure. And I'm really heartened by the results that I've seen on some college campuses. I mean, there's always negative stuff. You know, there's political moves to stop allowing people to read books in the library and, you know, circling the wagons. There's a lot of that going on in America right now. But I would say among young adults, college age adults, interfaith is interesting. And it's bringing back conversations about religion that were almost taboo 30 years ago. That was my experience. So.
Thank you. Thank you indeed. Different perspectives there, university campuses and becoming 50. Charendrit, you want to speak? If you do, you have to unmute yourself. That's it.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, in relation to education and young people, of course, who teaches religious literacy is a big issue, isn't it, in England? And what I find quite interesting is that I did a short survey when we were doing 550 years of Guru Nanak's birthday in our local community. And what I found very interesting was that the children knew much more about interfaith than their parents did.
Interesting.
And that is the area where quite a number of issues in relation to prejudice, hate, those sort of things come up. So how do we actually teach children is very, very important. Because those are going to be our future leaders. So that is one thing. And the second thing is, how do we actually involve in the education of the young people in colleges, schools, and through Interfaith Week, there is quite a lot of opportunity here in the UK if people want to make use of that. So those are the two things that I thought I should share.
Excellent. Thank you. I agree with you. There's a lot more interest in the kind of interaction between faiths than studying one single one or even, you know, a kind of religious studies course. Somehow it seems to be this is where people actually come together and the things they value and talk about and cherish, you know, are put to the test in a sense.
And if you want, on 12th of August, we are doing an interfaith walk locally in Hounslow, where we are visiting 4 different places.
Okay. We invite all Americans to come and join you.
That'll be a great one, wouldn't it?
Any other kind of comments or proposals, questions or whatever that people...
Can I?
Yeah.
Can I have a word?
Well, okay, Alan, we're going to round up with the education stuff after you. And we only have a few minutes left.
One of the reasons I went to the Pope is because the children have no voice. So in the Yemen, 11,000 children have been killed. And in England, we have something like 8 million kids with mental health problems. And I got my report on child suicide and London knifings on Boris's desk the day he took office. And it's only then that they began to have this leveling up. So the difference between the religion, the rich and the poor, is that the poor get no education and they don't understand religious things. And that's why they're brought up with no idea of music, art, and all the beautiful things which should be taught. And this is why worldwide I've done a campaign that every single child should have holistic education and community creativity centers in every town and village, so that every child has a holistic education. And without that, there are no human rights. There's no such thing as human rights unless every child has holistic education. And that is why I went to the Pope. And
thank you, Alan.
it's colossal, the damage which is being done because children don't get a proper education.
Thank you, Alan. I mean, you've done sterling work and continue to do so. We know that. Terrific. Warwick has his hand up.
Yes, it's a question, I suppose, mostly for Steve, but others, may be interested. I'm interested in your view on the future of the international interfaith movement. I mean, our title as an organization is the World Congress of Faiths, and I think at the time that it was established, it was international in its aspirations. But what we have now, it seems to me, is a cluster of good and impressive interfaith work, at national levels, especially in North America, but in Europe and elsewhere. But there doesn't seem to me at the moment much in the way of an international interfaith movement. And I'd be interested in others' observations about that.
I think you're right on there. What I've experienced is I was basically spiritual for all the way through the 70s, 80s, 90s, and it wasn't until 2008 that I became strongly aware of what was happening around the world. In 2009, my wife and I attended the first Parliament of World Religions and were totally blown away at 8,000 people from 80 countries who were doing things. To that end, we have tried to maintain a connection with all of these groups, and they're all doing wonderful work in their area. In terms of coming together and creating a better world, unfortunately, we have a number of people who still believe that due to your color or your culture or your race or your sexuality or your whatever, you're not as good as they are. And I have no idea how to bridge that gap. But I know that, to answer your question, that people are doing exactly what we believe in their area. And it's only conferences like this, Interfaith Awareness Week or the Parliament or Harmony Week or whatever, that people are saying, oh, maybe there are more people. And so we're slowly gaining a little edge here and there. But I'm just excited to be with you and to see what you're doing and to be more involved in that kind of thing. And once we have the YouTube of this presentation, it's going on the website and being archived for the world to see.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. It is just 1 minute after 9, and that's the witching hour, I'm afraid. So I'm going to draw us to a close.
Maksud was going to ask a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not looking right round the screen properly. We can afford just a little one. Maksud, sorry.
I don't think it's a question. I think it's a rather kind of observation. Steve, I think you quite rightly mentioned about responding to Warwick's question about the kind of popularism, far right, and when you're looking at even in the Europe and in North America, and then you go beyond in the Middle East and further into Indian subcontinent. So I think there is a very small minority who's doing what we're trying to do, but the popularism and the power to be are kind of dominant, and they are obviously there is a anti-Semitism, there is a kind of, you name it, Islamophobia, and trying to show the supremacy on the minority. And I think I would agree with you that we need to encourage those small group in all over the globe. What are they doing? So we need to bring them into kind of among ourselves.
Yeah, I agree 100%. That's why I created the World Interfaith Network, which is nothing more than a database. It lists the different groups around the world. I've got about 300 different names that are doing interfaith work. And what I get from people who email me is, I never knew there were this many groups. I thought what we were doing in one part of the world or another was pretty much it. So I think the answer, if there is one, is that we need to get known. I mean, people carry flags and they protest and they're against this and they're against that. All we do is say, we love everyone, even the protesters. And so when can we teach the protesters that you're okay even if we disagree with you? That the essence of God, of whatever that incredible being is that makes up our energy and gives us our ability to do, is within every person, no matter where you're from. I don't know how to do it yet, but I do know that we need to be louder.
Thank you. Good. Well, some very good comments there, and a good thing to finish on in terms of the discussion. But I am going to draw us to a bit of a close, but take us back to, as far as this session is concerned, with the World Congress of Faith, to the beginning of tonight and the founder. We produced not long ago this book, Unutterable Joy, which contains some excellent talks and lectures and so on that the World Congress has given over the years. And at the beginning, we have a short piece from his daughter, Dame Eileen Younghusband, and I just want to read some little bit from what she writes about Francis Younghusband. She says, this is in 1966, he was, she said, a very happy person with enormous strength and simplicity of character. In the sense, he was very much a whole person, with, I think, almost no internal conflict or guilt, and very few doubts. Perhaps this is why, although I saw him angry sometimes, I never saw him in a temper or lose his temper. And certainly self-pity or conceit were very far from him. He was simple, because he was single-minded, strong and clear-minded, knowing inside himself who and what he was and what he could and should do. The characteristics people most remember about him are this simplicity, happiness, vitality, often an impish sense of humor, a complete lack of pettiness, because he was absorbed in things beyond himself. And over it all, there was a quality of greatness. And then a bit later, and we'll come to an end, this picture I've given you may sound unreal, almost too good to be true. He was indeed human, and he had his weaknesses, his gaps, his blind spots, like all of us. But nonetheless, what I've tried to convey to you really was him. He had about him a quality of greatness, of great simplicity, great joy, great faith in the love of God and the goodness of the universe, great singleness of purpose. Whatever he did with complete absorption, and all he had he gave. In earlier years, he gave to the service of his country. in later years to religion, and finally to his great love of the World Congress of Faiths. So I thought that was rather nice to have that sort of recommendation from Francis' young husband and his daughter Diane, propelling us into the future with that kind of vision. So thanks everyone for your participation, for your joining, wherever you are, and whatever you're doing. May it be blessed and go forward with joy, young husband simplicity, and making quite a bit of noise where you can.
Great.
Take care. All
Thank
blessed.
you. Thank
Bye-bye
you.
now.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you very much.